Well, from security to online privacy, that's a huge topic right now, as you know. And joining me is Greg Sparrow, Senior Vice President with Compliance Point, which makes sure that the tech industry complies with regulations and rules and tries to make sure they follow exactly the guidelines they're supposed to. And just last week, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, as we talked about a great deal, was grilled by Congress. Do you think anything's going to change as a result of that appearance in Washington, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that depends on the actual users of Facebook and really whether they stay focused on the issue at hand. I think what I'd like to think has changed is the awareness, right? Is the fact that consumers are more aware about how companies are gathering this information, what they're using it for, and how they monetize it. I think that's one of the big things that's been missing.
Greg, is this much more widespread than we believe it is in terms of the gathering of information on us?
I think so. I mean, I think being in the industry, I think we're more aware of it, but I think the general consumer probably is not. I think they at least, they sign these privacy policies, they acknowledge things and just click next, next, next.
I've never read a single one of them. Who does, right?
They go through a lot of that, and I think they're not really aware of the amount of information that's being collected.
Is it impossible to go through a single day without giving up some of your information that you don't even aware
I think
of?
if you have a cell phone on you at this point, I think it's very difficult.
Really? That's a little scary, isn't it?
Yes,
for
it is.
people, I think. Let me ask you this. What should companies like Facebook do to protect users' privacy?
Well, I think part of it, and this is where when we come into organizations, it's really about trying to understand, what the brand means and how they want to engage with the consumer. I think the organization really needs to be very thoughtful about how they do that. Once we establish that, then it's really about, basically making sure that they implement the appropriate controls. In the context of Facebook, with what we saw, really I think that the issue there was that they had third parties with access to this data on the back end and really didn't have a lot of checks and balances in place to be able to monitor what was going on there.
All right, the silver lining here is we now know that this is going on. So that helps. Greg, you work with companies looking to become GDPR compliant. That's General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union.
Sure.
That's great for the European Union. What does that mean for us?
Well, I mean, I think for U.S. citizens, I don't think it really means a whole lot, frankly.
Okay.
I don't think that the regulation really applies to them unless they're in the European space. I think it really means more to organizations right now. Organizations have got to look at this regulation, look at whether it applies to them based on where they operate and who they're marketing to. If it does apply, they've got some heavy lifting likely to do to become compliant with that regulation. And there's a lot of teeth to it. So the fines can be quite hefty, up to 25 million euros.
So it's punitive.
Oh yes, or 4% of global revenue, whichever is greater. So there's a lot there and a lot of risk for organizations who aren't compliant.
All right, Greg, as we wrap up, is this online privacy issue going to get worse before it gets better?
I think, when you look at it internationally, you've got a lot of regulation and a movement really towards consumerism. I think really what you've got to look at is here in the U.S., what's going to happen, and some of that comes down to the federal regulations. The political climate is probably such that it's not necessarily very likely to improve in the short term. But hopefully with issues like Facebook, people become more aware and watch this stuff over the long term.
And add more pressure to the companies to do the right thing. Greg?
Absolutely.
Greg Sparrow,
yeah.
Compliance
Thanks
Point.
for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.